Hey, Rach, let's be real. Moving sucks. Packing double sucks. And don't even get me started on the emotional unraveling that happens when I open a junk drawer and find a single birthday candle circa 2009.
Yeah, but don't you know about STG Concierge Moving and Organizing? They're a badass all female team that packs, unpacks, and organizes your life so you don't spiral into a clutter induced breakdown.
Wait, what? You mean to tell me these women don't just show up with bubble wrap? They show up with a plan? They'll wrestle my chaos into submission, label my life, and unpack my kitchen faster than I can say, "Where's the damn coffee maker?"
Yes, I am. Whether you're downsizing, upsizing, packing up your parents' home, or just drowning in your own disorganized drama, STG Concierge Moving and Organizing gets it done. They do it with style, with sanity, and your personal favorite, without judgment. Because let's face it, Dr. Boca, you're not lazy, you're just over it.
Oh my God, I so am. So, what I'm hearing you say is that I need to get my head out of my drawers and go to www.stgconcierge.com, where I'll be one click away from polishing my unpolished clutter.
Yup, it's unpolishedly tested and unpolishedly approved.
What do you get when the audacious and the therapist collide? A crash course in unpolished therapy. Rachel Silver-Cohen and Dr. Boca aren't afraid to spin out of control, tackling all the tough talk. Their weekly sesh meets at the corner of Audacity and Advice, where their wheels and yours get turned upside down.
Morning. Hi, Dr. Boca.
Good morning. Hello, Rach. It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you too. And hello to all the listeners and the viewers for that matter now. If you forgot who we are, I'm Rachel Silver-Cohen, joined by the one and only DB, Dr. Boca. We are Unpolished Therapy, where we are meeting on the corner of Audacity and Advice. I know my wheels are about to get spun upside down, if for no other reason, Dr. Boca, it's been a minute.
It has been a minute and it's so good to see you. So I am just really excited to get down and dirty today with a topic that I feel has been very relevant to us, even in that it's been a hot minute since we've been here. And I know that people have been very excited about us coming back, and as I'm super, super excited. But I feel like we should be bringing up the topic of boundaries, right? I think that's a huge topic in my clinical work, but I also think that, the common question is like, where you been? And I'm like, you know what? Life has taken us in many, many directions, and we're ready to just start right back up. And people look at me like, but where you been? And so I was like, that's such an interesting thing that maybe we should talk about some boundaries. No, I mean, I think it's a good
No, and
topic.
I'm happy that you said that because first of all, yeah, I mean, it has been a minute. We know that. And I guess we've been busy with life and that's okay. And in jumping back on, right? It does make sense to at least kind of figure out where we've been, where we're going, et cetera, et cetera. And boundaries in and of itself is one of those like hot topics that is like a buzzword, I think, in the mental health space.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, it is relevant because I guess we should back up and maybe you can explain to me and
Sure.
the listeners and the viewers for that matter too, like the clinical phrase of boundaries and what that really means. I think it's easy for a lot of us to be like, oh, I'm putting up a boundary, I'm putting up a wall. There's things I want to talk about, there's things I don't. This is what you're entitled to, this is what you're not. But maybe we should back up a little bit and let's kind of give us the broad stroke.
Yeah, like you're not wrong. Though, I mean, that's really the concept of it. Like we have different types of relationships. And when we are born, we have no boundaries, right? Everything is very self-focused. And like we think that we are the person that is mirroring us, right? And so you've heard probably the term of enmeshment. There are some parent-child dieheads. Okay, so you haven't. So
I'm
we
very
have.
rusty, Dr. Boga.
I
I've
I
moved
am
your
too.
therapy for a very long time. So
Well,
so
and I am
please
too.
educate me.
Right. So, okay. So a lot of times we'll have parents that feel that it is totally appropriate, or friends or whatever, that it's very totally appropriate to be involved in every minute of every move that the child makes. Right.
Mhm.
And as a child, that's really important because we're mirroring them, and we want to attune to them and things like that. However, as they get older, there are certain things that developmentally they should be doing and exploring and expanding on. And some parents have a very hard time allowing their children to do that. And others are like, go, like, do your thing. And they're almost too, there are no, like, they're just so loosey goosey, right?
Okay.
So when we talk about boundaries, it's like we have what I like to call like a fence that has a gate. Okay. And so it's not like we're going to put up a divider between a child and a parent and say, you cannot cross this line ever. We start to, as we get to be middle aged, middle schoolers, I'm sorry, or high schoolers, or as we start to grow into college and adulthood, we now have a stronger sense of self, who we are as people. And when that self can lead, it could make the decisions of, wait a minute, this doesn't feel safe for me, or I'm not okay with this. In this relationship, that feels very uncomfortable, or that feels very intrusive, or that feels like I'm compromising myself in it. That's when we say, okay, we're putting up the fence and we're going to close the gate. That's a boundary.
So, okay. So it sounds like it started like when we're a kid, it's like a white picket fence that
Okay.
parents or whomever are putting up, and we are just under the assumption that we walk in and out through that fence and life is grand because that's all we know. But my unpolished interpretation of this is as we get older, maybe that fence is a little bit more wrought irony or a little rusty or rickety or I don't know whaty. And we have to pick and choose what we're willing to walk through and what we're willing to say, whoa, 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 hold on a second. I don't know if I want to step over that threshold.
Right. And so the only thing that I would change is at somewhere along the lines, the parents make the boundaries, right?
Mhm,
And at
mhm.
some point when we have a more developed sense of self, in an ideal scenario, we could set our own boundaries. Unfortunately, though, there are people in the world who believe that their boundaries, or lack thereof,
Mhm.
um, supersedes what somebody else tries to put up. So they start to encroach on that fence that maybe I had up, and they
Okay.
like try to climb the fence,
Mm.
right?
Okay.
And but the boundary is mine. I can set my own gate around me, and I can choose to or fence around me, sorry, and I can choose to open that gate and let Rachel through that, but it
Mhm.
doesn't feel safe to let Aunt Sally through that.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
And we have different fences for different scenarios and different people.
Okay.
So it is very appropriate and it is self-care. Like, I have a lot of patients who come to me and they're like, I can't say no to somebody,
Mm. Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Or I have friends, not me personally, but I'm just saying, I have friends. I'm talking as a client right now. I have
Yeah, yeah.
friends who take advantage of, right? Or
Right.
only call when they need this.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or the expectation of my family is that I go to every holiday, right? So we sit here and we say, okay, that might be their expectation, their wants, their needs, and they are encroaching and putting that onto you. You have the right and the need to set boundaries around their requests or their demands and that relationship, so that you feel safe in that. If
So, okay. Amazing. And this is such a reminder and to the listeners and the viewers now out there how great Dr. Boca is, because I feel like my brain is just like sponging up all this great knowledge, and we've been off the block for a while, right? My question though is right out of the gate is how would those
Mhm.
who didn't know you could set boundaries, how would we know that that's even something you can do if either A, you were never taught that like boundaries is a good thing, right? If
Mhm.
we're like a people pleaser, or we don't know how to say no, or we think as though if we share X, that means we're required to share Y and Z also. And
Mhm.
how would I know all of this if not for you, Dr. Boca?
Well, I'm not the only one. But I think that's you're asking a very valid question, right? You don't know what you don't know. And
Mhm.
so what happens is a lot of people start feeling really badly. They start dreading certain situations, or they see certain ways of being that come out with certain people,
Mhm.
right? And they fall back into what they've always done. And they're like, why am I so unhappy in this? Or there's a part of me that doesn't want to do this. Why am I saying yes? Or there's you're finding ways to like weasel out of something, right? And usually those are the telltale signs that you're like, this relationship is uncomfortable. There's something about this relationship that doesn't feel true to self. It feels like I'm doing something. There's a part of me doing this for somebody else, or to avoid punishment, or to avoid rejection, or to avoid abandonment. And that's when you kind of know, like, I should probably pay attention to this a little bit more, because I might have to, out of self-care,
Mhm.
say, yeah, no, that doesn't work for me. I'm going to close that gate right now. Doesn't mean that the gate can't ever open again. It doesn't mean, and this is why people hate setting boundaries. They believe that if they set a boundary and somebody has a reaction to that boundary, that they are bad people for having
Mm.
set that boundary. And I
Yeah.
always like to tell people, like, setting a boundary doesn't make you a bad person. It actually makes you a healthy person, right? Because it allows you to dictate for yourself. How the other person receives that is on
Mhm.
them, right? We're not responsible for how somebody else reacts to our boundary. We can only hold ourselves accountable for self
Right.
care.
Right. Right. You're making great points. And as you're explaining this to me, I'm in my own head, like my wheels are spinning, right? We are here back on the corner of Audacity and Advice. And it makes sense that in my world, we had been off for a while, right? And
Hmm.
we were pumping the brakes, then kind of gassing back up, then pumping the brakes. And I guess you and I were setting our own boundaries with everybody else without them even really knowing it, because
Right.
we were practicing self-care. And I think that
Correct.
made us healthier. And life gets in the way, like things come up and whatnot. And while we love the podcast, right, and we've missed each other so much, and we've missed the listeners, and we've missed now the viewers,
Yep.
and we've missed being able to break down the wreckage, because not for anything, there hasn't not been a lack of wreckage. There we,
Right.
we have a pile up a year long now that I can't wait to tackle into. But it was really important, I think, for both of us, for my mental health and your mental health, and our immediate worlds, to kind of pump the brakes, park the car, and do what we needed to do. And it feels so good to kind of feel validated that
Hmm.
you, as the expert in the room, right, are saying that setting boundaries is, at least what I'm hearing, is setting boundaries is the healthiest thing you can do for oneself, versus thinking as though you're letting people down by just
Hmm.
doing what others potentially need and abandoning self.
Self.
I mean, am
Yeah,
I
self.
saying
That's
that right?
exactly how you say it. And a lot of my clients are like, I feel guilty doing this. And like, guilt is an interesting feeling, but it's just a feeling. It's not a fact. Just because you did this and you feel guilty doesn't make you a bad person for doing this, right? So it's important for us to pay attention to that. It doesn't mean you can feel badly about it, but it doesn't make you a bad person. And I
Mm,
think that's where boundaries get like a really bad rap, because a lot of people do feel guilty, especially the first couple of times they do it, not because they don't know it's the right thing to do for them, but it's because of the reaction that somebody else is having.
Mhm.
So now they feel like, oh, I'm a bad person. I let them down. I abandoned them. I did whatever. And what I try to tell them is it's kind of like Botox, right? Like it hurts.
You
Like,
gotta love Dr. Boca for really good, like diving deep right out of the gate in like self-help and our unpolished therapy here, and somehow making a direct line to Botox. I mean, that's why we love you.
you gotta know your audience, right? Like
Okay.
it's all got to be relatable,
So
right?
let me hear how you're gonna correlate this. I can't wait.
Well, it's kind of like, when you do it the first couple of times, it's like really painful,
Mhm.
right? But
And then you just can't wait to
right.
get the
And
next
it's like,
year.
but it feels so good afterwards because the results are
Mm.
so good, right?
Mm.
It's also, we can compare it to a detox, right?
Okay.
While you're doing it or the first time you do it or start it, you feel like crap,
Mhm.
right? But eventually that pain is part of the healing process. And the truth is that, I'll give you an example. When we hear about teenagers, right?
Mhm.
And we've heard historically, and people always are like, no. And you ask a teenager and they're like, no. But the truth is, a lot of us believe that if we're the cool parent
Mhm.
and we let the kids go out, do whatever they want, let them drink, let them smoke, we're like the fun parents, that like our kids are going to be so happy with that. And they're going to be like, we're the greatest. Doesn't work that way. The teens actually, they may not be able to communicate this, but
Mhm.
they want boundaries. They need limitations in some way because, Rachel, you will relate to this. When you have a roadmap, right? And you know where you need to kind of fall into to be most successful, and you know how to get from point A to point B, you don't feel as like lost. That's kind of what boundaries do. It kind of sets like a path for people to say, hey, like, yeah, we'll hang out, but not for like 7 hours because I have stuff I need to get done, right? That's a very
I don't want to be around anyone for 7
right.
hours. So
But that's a very appropriate boundary.
right.
There's like those family members that come into your
Yeah,
house and
and
they like
never leave.
they set up shop for like
Mhm.
the month.
Mhm.
No, that doesn't work,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so for these kids, these teenagers, they wind up when they don't have boundaries sometimes, they wind up in very precarious positions because they may not be comfortable drinking, okay, at a party. All their friends are drinking. And if they had had a boundary put around them, such as you have to be home by 10 o'clock or you can't drink or whatever the case is, or even if they even had the boundary of an excuse, like I'm on medication,
Mhm.
it gives them an opportunity to get themselves out of a very uncomfortable situation. Without those boundaries, they might not have been able to respond in it and say, I don't want to do it.
Okay. And while you were talking, you used the word well, now I don't even remember what you just said, but something about like a curfew or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I'm thinking to myself how the way that our world has worked and with just the transition with phrases and words and mental health. Like when you said setting a boundary that like you needed to be home by 10 o'clock. Maybe I just threw the word curfew in because I'm
Right.
thinking from my
Sure.
childhood. I didn't realize that like curfew and boundary, it's like they're adjacent, right? It's just in this generation, we're calling it a boundary. In our generation, it was a curfew or a rule or,
Or
you know,
limits,
or or a
boundary.
or a
Like,
or a limit.
right.
Or
I'm using the
basically
word
like my mom said, this is the rule and you abide by it, or there's the door and see you later. Figure it out on your own, right?
Mhm.
In this generation, I guess boundary, or when we use, we hear the kids say these days, it's a trigger. I don't
Right.
think we had that word in our dialect back then, right?
I
So
think we use something like, "Oh my god, that just, like, made me wanna, like, shit my pants." Like, I feel like that was kind of what we used as a trigger, right? Something that
right.
just, like, scared us, something unsettled us, something like, we
Right.
never
In today's world, it's like trigger or trauma.
Mhm.
And in our
Trauma's a good
day,
one.
it was, oh my God, I'm having a breakdown, or I
Right.
don't even know what. But that all being said, though, I appreciate the way that you are kind of breaking down what a real boundary is and how important it is to set them. And it does kind of make me feel better because in our little hiatus or break that we took or whatnot, there were so many times where I was like, should we be jumping back in? And we proverbially, because I was talking to myself in my head about it, and I didn't know what to do. I was kind of wrapped up in my own stuff, and the guilt, as you say, right, of what do other people expect of me versus, but wait a minute, like, what do I expect of myself, and what are my own limits of what I can handle and what I can't? I like to think of myself as someone who can handle a complete smorgasbord of a lot, but at the end of the day, again, if we're using analogies, you're using Botox, I'm using, a buffet of food, right? Not a lot has changed, right?
Shocker.
Right? There's just so much on my plate that it's just I can't finish it all at once, and I can't do it effectively where I can digest and metabolize this to the utmost potential. And
Right.
the
It makes
thing,
us more
go ahead.
capable, right? It makes us able to do the things that we need to do better.
Yeah. And I want to tell you this, and I know you're going to say, Rachel, you shouldn't be comparing and contrasting, and comparison is the thief of joy, and so on and so forth. But as it relates to boundaries, coincidence or not, I don't know. I know nothing we like to think is a coincidence. But very recently, I was listening to a podcast. Monica Lewinsky has this great podcast, and I love her. And Savannah Guthrie was being interviewed on her podcast. And I love, for those of you out there who are Today Show people and whatnot, I love Savannah Guthrie. And I didn't know this about her. I probably watch her 5 days a week for the last umpteen years and so on and so forth. But she apparently was on Monica's podcast promoting a book that she wrote recently. And she was talking about there were certain parts of her life that were off limits that she just wasn't going to write about. She wasn't going to talk about. And the press, when she was on this like press junket tour or whatever, started like poking the bear a little bit. And she was like, whoa, like, I know I'm a public person and I know you think you all know me, but I have the right to reserve what I want to share and what
Yep.
I don't want to share. And you either like it or you don't, but that's my boundary. And I felt so empowered hearing her say that because, I mean, again, who am I? Who are you? Whatever. Like, we're certainly not that, but it made me realize that like even the best of the best of the best in the public world, who's to say that they don't have the right to set a boundary? And it just
Absolutely.
felt amazing. And it was such a sigh of relief that, you know
Mhm.
what? Like, we all are entitled and deserve the right to share or not share what we feel is important or what we don't and what we want to hold tight to close to the vest. Many
Mhm.
many episodes ago we talked about the difference between privacy and
Mhm.
secrecy,
Secrecy.
and kind of
Mhm.
that fell into the loop a little bit on that, and kind of like what jogged my mind in terms of setting boundaries. And I just thought that, wow, you know what, maybe I haven't been that great setting boundaries, and that's something that I need to work on.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've all heard Stephen Covey does, and we all haven't. I have in my professional world, but a lot of people know Stephen Covey, and he explains something, which is when you're on an airplane, what do they always say? They say, "Should we lose altitude or whatever? An oxygen front mask in front of you will
Mhm,
fall. Please place the mask on yourself before you assist others, or particularly children." Right? Like it's
mhm,
how they say it.
mhm,
That's what we're doing. We're putting an oxygen mask on ourselves. We're saying we need to breathe. We need to calm down. We need to focus on us. That doesn't make us selfish. Again, self care, okay? It makes us realize that if we keep giving and doing and allowing other people to intrude upon our wants, our needs, our feelings, our beliefs, then we are, in essence, letting them take over not only their life, which they might be screwing up, but now I'm allowing them to screw up mine, right? It doesn't work. We all have to be responsible and accountable for ourselves. And we always should do it from a place that we feel the best about ourselves, right? And we feel whole, because every time we don't, we get resentful, we get angry. We start taking it out on other people. And there is a part of us that acts out in some way where everything becomes more difficult.
So that was beautifully said.
Thank you.
And I want to like process it a little bit. So while I'm processing it though, I think a poignant question would be that, we always say, if I have the question, maybe our listeners and
Sure.
viewers have that question too. If we were to break this down, Dr. Boca, in like boundary baby steps for
Sure.
those of us who really didn't get the A or the B in boundaries, right? That
Mhm.
maybe we've been getting more of a C or a D and we
Yep.
wanted to up our game. If you had to come up with like 1, 2, or 3 tips to kind of tiptoe into setting better boundaries for oneself without,
Okay.
you don't want to come out all of a sudden I've been this people pleaser my whole life and now I'm putting down these hard rules. You want to ease into it
Mhm.
subtly. Are there any tips you could share with our listeners that would maybe help them ease in to setting better boundaries?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one is to be clear, right? If you are unclear with what those boundaries are, if you don't know yourself,
Okay.
you're going to have a very hard time setting the boundary. But I always believe, and this is because I like to always give people the benefit of the doubt, I always encourage my patients to inform the person that they are working on setting boundaries.
Hi, it's Rachel Silver-Cohen, and I haven't seen you in so long. I just want to let you know that I'm
No.
going to be setting a boundary today.
Not like that. But I would say something like, if you asked me something and it felt uncomfortable for me, I'd be like, listen, Rach, this is really hard for me to say, but I'm working on trying to do some self care. And so I am happy to help you out and I'm happy to listen to you right now. However, I can't be like your 24-hour emotional support pet.
Mm,
Okay. And I know that might not sound great. And I know you might be upset by that, but I really need to take this space for myself. But I'm still here if there's something you want to talk about that's, a little bit of something, but I just can't be available to you all the time. That's a very, very fair way of saying a boundary. It's pretty clear, right? It's like, I am here for you for these types of things. And you can get even more specific. Like, I'm happy to talk about your kids, right? But if you're going to bring in another one of my friends that I still have a really good friendship with, I'm not okay about talking about that because it puts me in a very
right.
precarious position. And I can be there for my friends,
Mhm,
but if they're going to be looking for something from me,
mhm,
like me taking one of their sides, I'm not doing that. If I'm uncomfortable doing
mhm,
that, I have
mhm.
every right to say that. And I would be very clear. Listen, it's really uncomfortable for me because that I love you. I love this person. And I know that you're coming to me because you need to like vent and be heard about what it is. I can listen to you, but I am not comfortable giving you any type of advice about this. Or I would prefer if maybe this becomes a topic where you go someplace else and talk with another friend about it because it puts me in an awfully uncomfortable position.
All right, I
Very
wanna
clear.
keep it I wanna this was Dr. Boca being an amazing Dr. Boca, which is probably the right moment to remind our audience, it's not real therapy, we wanna protect her license. If you really do have, mental health concerns, questions, cares, and you need to reach out to Dr. Boca directly, please do so. We'll link all of that on, the episode notes and so on and so forth. But for the purposes of today, you know that this is just our unpolishedness as we, are breaking the wreckage down. That being said, I want to keep it real and I want you to make our audience and I guess me feel better by answering this question.
Uh-oh.
How many people do you think percentage wide potentially in your practice or just in general or whatnot do you think in the world, not in the world, I mean, let's roll that back, but generally speaking, are good at setting boundaries? Or do we all need a little help? Because it
Oh, we
to
all need a
me
little bit. We all
seems
need a
like
little
there's
help.
no way I could be like, listen, I really want to talk to you about this, but I'm not really that comfortable. And like I get it on paper. It
Mhm.
sounds amazing as you parrot it out. Like this would be the textbook way to do it. But
Sure.
but let's now kind of give me
Okay.
the real deal.
Right. So people are terrible at boundaries. This is why we stay in terrible relationships and terrible friendships. And that is why we are more drained than ever. We're working harder. We say yes to our bosses. We'll take on one
Mhm.
more thing. We'll, I don't know, we'll, of course, take our kids everywhere. And, right. our parents, when they raised us, were
Mhm.
much better with boundaries than we are. Okay. They were much better. Now, they could be too rigid in some of their boundaries,
Mhm.
but they struggled in their areas also.
Mhm.
They weren't emotionally very warm. Maybe they took it a little too rigid. This younger generation who's
Mhm.
therapized,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
They have
Mhm.
a very easy time setting boundaries,
Right.
much easier than
Yeah.
we have. They don't
Yeah.
want to go to a party. Most of them are like, yeah, I'm not into it tonight. And that's like a no. They're done. Most of the kids aren't like, come on, come on, come on. They don't care. They're on to their next friends. Or they'll say, I don't know, whatever it is. Like, I'm done with this relationship. It doesn't feel like I want to date this person anymore. They're done.
So
Our
we're like the
generation,
sandwich generation
yes, yes.
from our parents' generation that did it one way, our kids and that generation that they're so evolved and their therapy is just like part of the norm and mental
They got
health is
other shit though.
right.
They definitely
And
have other stuff.
and
Yes.
we're kind of, squeezed in the middle here from how we were to how we want to be, right?
Mhm.
And trying to find the balance in that. I mean,
Right. And
that's my
yeah,
interpretation.
and we're exhausted, right? We
Mhm.
are trying to find the short-term piece, right? Like by saying yes, and
Mhm.
we're sacrificing the long-term piece.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that for every like time we say like fine or we fake it, that's a future resentment that we're going to bring into our relationship. Right. But we struggle with it because a lot of us are people pleasers. A lot of us were shaped by if I meet the needs of my parents, they are good, right?
Mm. Mhm.
They communicate love to us. So we learned, okay, we're going to please them. And so we by definition when we were doing that, we were making our boundary a little bit permeable and then a
Mhm.
little bit more permeable and
Mhm.
a little bit
Mhm.
more permeable.
And then
And
there was
eventually
no boundary at all.
and that's what we call kind of like enmeshment, right? Where
Mm.
they like intrude on our boundaries and our sense of self is based on their needs, not
Mm.
ours, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So, in order to develop a sense of self, basically a sense of self is knowing like what do we want? What do we not want? What feels good? What doesn't feel good? And then acting accordingly and being okay with that, putting that fence up with a gate. So, Rachel, if you asked me to do something, it might feel really good for me to want to say yes. By all means, open the gate, let Rachel come in, let's have a little, tea party. But there might be a friend in my life who has taken a lot of advantage of me and they
Mhm.
only reach out when they want something from me.
Mhm.
I'm going to close the gate. Doesn't
Mm.
feel good. I'm finding myself being like just really resentful about it. Yeah,
Mhm.
no
Mhm.
thanks. Okay.
Mhm.
They're going to
Mhm.
get upset. That's going to be hard for a people pleaser. The guilt isn't going to kill you. The guilt will pass.
Mhm.
And as time goes on, just like adolescents who want clear understanding of what's going to happen or what I should expect, if we tell them this doesn't work for me, or as lots of people say, no is a complete sentence, that's a
Mhm.
boundary,
Mhm.
right? Very
Mhm.
easy.
Mhm.
So once we start doing that, the guilt starts to subside. And the reason being is because we feel better,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
And we start to say, hey, we're never going to live without guilt. Like we're never going to live without guilt. Like it just, especially, the way that we were raised, we're just never going to live without guilt. But we learn how to like tolerate the guilt better, I guess. It's like, I don't know. It just kind of when you're feeling good about yourself, the
Well, you're
guilt.
able to like self-regulate,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. The guilt is what happens with guilt by definition. And this is a really good point is it disrupts the nervous system.
Okay.
Right. And so we become like this almost like a trauma is happening, right? Like we're getting
Mhm.
triggered. And as soon as we realize that we can calm ourselves down by paying attention to our own needs and filling our own needs and our own wants, we don't need to look to other people to give us praise or
Mhm.
the like affirmations that we're looking
Mhm.
for.
Mhm.
We aren't dependent on their mood. We feel better eventually, but a lot of people get stuck in that guilt phase
Mhm.
and then they backpedal. So what I would
Mhm.
say to our listeners is guilt, like every emotion, will pass. It's uncomfortable. I can't make everything comfortable for you, but just sit and breathe and remind yourself this is what you wanted. and you were advocating for it, if they didn't have this reaction, you wouldn't be feeling this way. And the
Mm,
guilt is different in that guilt is just an emotion. It doesn't make you bad, right? Just because you did this doesn't make you bad, even though you're feeling that way in the moment.
right. So setting boundaries is good. Setting
Yes,
boundaries is not bad. Self-regulating, self-care, putting yourself
all good.
first, putting the oxygen mask on yourself, all of that falls into taking care of oneself. And
Mhm.
if that means setting a boundary is good ultimately for your long game, right? As
Right.
opposed to short term just saying yes to people please.
Right, and people who love you will learn to work in that boundary. Some of them, okay, there's a few very, very significant mental health issues that it might be a bigger struggle, and sometimes
Mhm,
we do. The boundary is we have to cut them out of our life, and it's very sad.
mhm.
It's horribly sad when we have to do that. But if you are in a relationship with somebody who you feel better not interacting with that person, that's usually a sign
That's a
that this
tell.
person isn't there's no boundary here that feels good for
Yeah.
us, right? So we want to set that boundary and understand that those that love us will feel safer eventually because they'll know what to expect. They'll know kind of like the rules of engagement, so to speak. And we aren't always on edge every time we're with them. Family holidays become more exciting or more enjoyable. I would never say maybe exciting, but enjoyable, right? They don't become so everybody coming in with those parts that are so bitter and angry and defensive. They just kind of are. We set the expectation. I mean, I can give like real life examples, like you get invited to a party and you only want to go for a little bit. That's fine. Okay. So decide, hey, mom, only going to come for the dinner. We're going to leave right before the dessert, but we wanted to make sure that we got to spend some time with you. This way
Okay.
you have an exit plan. You can always stay later if you decide
Mhm,
to. Oh,
mhm,
yeah, you know what? We were going to go, but everything's cool,
mhm,
like whatever.
mhm,
But at least you feel better having said, this is what we're going to do. We don't ask for permission. We just
mhm.
tell them that this is what we're going to do. And it creates a sense of safety in us. So I am a big proponent of boundaries, big
I love
proponent.
it. Yeah, I think you're right, and I'm loving like the boundary conversation. I think it's warranted. I think it's relevant. I think more people than not probably aren't as good at setting boundaries as they wish they were. Myself, number one on that list. And I'm going to be practicing setting boundaries because I think that it can only make us better for ourselves, and then by making ourselves more whole, how does that not translate to our relationships with others as well, right? If this episode has done anything for me, it's reminded me how much A, I needed the unpolished therapy, B, how much I missed you, C, how great it does feel to be back in our driver's seats here as we meet on the corner of Audacity and Advice. And my wheels got spun upside down a little bit, and I hope yours did too, in a good way, of course. And I
It
know we
did.
have a lot of great things to come, and it feels really great to be back in the saddle. It's a little rusty,
A
right? We
little
we
bit.
need to
Sorry. Yeah.
work on that a little bit, but we
Sure.
will, and that's
We will.
okay.
And I just want to our listeners, I just want to put out that we are on video now, which is like so fun for us because I know that for me, I always like to imagine what they look like. And I'm always so surprised. So if you want to see Rachel and I and our faces, we are now on YouTube at Unpolished Therapy. If you like us just when you're driving in the car, you can keep finding our podcast on Apple and Spotify and all the platforms in which you would find your podcast. The fun part about being on video is that if you have any suggestions or topics that you want us to cover this season, like please put it down on the YouTube comments. And we're going to be trying a little bit new stuff on social media. So you can find us on Instagram at Unpolished Therapy, at Facebook at Unpolished Therapy. We are on X. You will not find us there, which is totally cool. And we are starting on TikTok, which I'm teaching myself. So we are Unpolished Therapy Podcast on Instagram. I'm sorry, on TikTok. Yes.
TikTok.
Yes, I got through all of them and I just messed up the TikTok one.
That's
but
okay. Well, that's
okay.
okay. You're unpolished, Dr. Boca. And
Yeah.
you too are entitled to give yourself some self-love and self-care and not take yourself so seriously and know how amazing you are, even if you
Aw.
botched up the TikTok or the tactic or whatever it is. And we're doing the best we can. But with that
Exactly.
said, I'm happy I got to see your pretty face and your beautiful
You
minds.
too.
And thank you for your wisdom, sharing it with myself and the listeners and the viewers. And as Dr. Boca said, you can find us on all the social media platforms, inclusive now of YouTube and TikTok. We're going to try to be back in a flash, and we'll look forward to meeting all of you on the corner of Audacity and Advice, where our wheels and yours get spun upside down. Thanks for hanging out with us. This has been another episode of Unpolished Therapy.
Great sesh, girls. Hey, everyone, like what you heard? Then don't miss out on what comes next. Subscribe now and please give the girls a 5-star rating. Learn more at www.unpolishedtherapy.com. Find and like them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We'll see you next week when Rachel Silver-Cohen and Dr. Boca ditch the couch, grab the mic, and break down all the wreckage.